What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host, Caleb. If you want to support me, you can always use that TCGplayer link in the description down below, or as always, just liking, commenting, subscribing will do the trick. Now, let's get into today's Deck Tech with Raffine. And honestly, guys, this guy's stacked. He's got protection, he's got evasion, and he's got a broken ability that allows you to churn through your deck like no other. All we need is a lot of very low-cost creatures that create creature tokens, and then we need big bombs that we want to discard. The last thing we'll need is a bunch of cheap reanimator spells, and then boom, you've got yourself a Shieldred on turn 4. Yes, good luck dealing with that. The other thing is, tokens synergize really well with this color combination, such as Marnius Calgar. This guy has double strike, and remember, Raffine is buffing our board up whenever we are conniving. So now we've got a massive double striking creature that draws us cards whenever we create treasure tokens, and we're probably never casting him for 5 mana. So, if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's kick it off by talking about the bombs we want to reanimate, because that's the exciting part of this deck. We have Marnius Calgar. This guy synergizes perfectly. Whenever we're creating those tokens, we're drawing cards. This guy is massive in himself, so whenever we connive, we can throw a lot of counters on him, and he will hit like a truck. Not to mention, in a pinch, he can create his own tokens. Alinda and Azer, another token creator that can also draw us a lot of cards. So now we're drawing cards and creating tokens, which is exactly what we want to do. Shirakai Genesis Engine. Again, drawing cards, discarding cards, and creating a lot of tokens. This one is pretty easy to hard cast also. Toxrill. This guy's going to be extremely brutal to reanimate early game. They're not going to be able to keep a board state, and we are going to be able to draw cards off of our slug army. Sire of Stagnation is just a solid value engine that can draw us a lot of cards. Elish Norn, we are running a token deck, so this can buff up our tokens while getting rid of any other token strategies. Shieldred, the Whispering one, is going to be amazing. We can just keep discarding bombs in our graveyard and keep reanimating with our Shieldred. Last but not least, we have Archfiend of Ifnir. This one's going to be amazing. Whenever we discard those cards, we can essentially just keep all of our opponent's creatures off of the board. Moving on, let's talk about how we are going to reanimate these creatures. We have Reanimate, a super cheap and powerful option. Stitch Together. Now this one does take a little bit of setup because we do need that threshold, but honestly, getting 7 cards in the graveyard is not going to be that difficult in this deck. Dread Return. There is going to be a lot of creature tokens that we can sacrifice for that flashback ability. Animate Dead. It's super wordy, but basically you just reanimate something from your graveyard. Victimize. Again, we will have a lot of fodder, so we can just sacrifice a creature and bring 2 of our bombs onto the battlefield. Ruthless Technomancer. We do have a couple creatures that can get super big and do want to die, so this will net us a lot of treasure tokens, and then we can sacrifice those treasure tokens to reanimate stuff from the graveyard. Celestine the Living Saint. She is not going to be a 3/4 in this deck, because if we start conniving with her, she's going to get massive, and then she's going to reanimate the stuff we discard with that connive ability. Super solid. Sarah Paragon. This one's going to be good just to play those lands that we have to discard. No, we don't get counters if we discard lands, but hey, sometimes we do need to keep our hand, so discarding lands is not always going to be a bad option. Not to mention, it does give us the option to cast our 3 CMC permanent spells from the graveyard, so that's also really good. Terror of Tawashi. Now this guy's kind of balanced because he's a 4/3, so he's pretty easy to chump block, but with our commander, if we discard the right cards, we can buff this guy up to the moon, make him extremely hard to block, and start reanimating our bombs from the graveyard. Archpriest of Shadows, another one that's going to be really good. When she enters the battlefield, she's not useless that turn, which is why I like her, because of that backup ability. And then again, she's only a 4/4, but with those connive triggers, we will be able to start buffing her up. We also have Mass Reanimation with Ancient Brass Dragon. This guy's going to be extremely crazy in the deck. Living Death. Super solid. Not only can it get rid of board states, but it can also just throw all of our bombs back onto the battlefield after a board wipe. Agadeem's Awakening, a perfect late game card. This can literally bring you back from nothing and win you the game. Let's move on to the token generation portion of the deck. We have Bone Miser. The important synergies here are creating that 2/2 zombie and drawing a card whenever we discard a non-land card. So now whenever we're buffing our creatures up and discarding creatures into the graveyard, we're just getting a bigger board and drawing cards. Dreadhorde Invasion, just a super solid card that's going to make a zombie token, and then that zombie token is just going to get bigger and bigger. Not to mention, if we get it to 6 power, which is not crazy in this deck, it will get lifelink, so it's just a solid beater that can keep attacking every turn. Chasm Skulker and Felisa. Now these two are just going to get bigger and bigger in the deck, and then when they die we get an instant board state. Rhea Ivor, another card that can just create an instant board state. Now we aren't trying to kill people with Toxic in the deck, but honestly, hey, if our creatures get big enough, it could become an option. Ghoulcaller Gisa and Jareth. There's a big possibility that we end up with a lot of useless creatures that have a lot of power just because our commander has buffed them up. So now we can actually sacrifice them for some solid value and to create an instant board state. Chasm Skulker and Felici are perfect targets for these guys. Ominous Seas is also going to be another solid thing that we can just create an 8/8 out of nowhere and then sack it to either Ghoulcaller Gisa or her brother to create, boom, 8 zombies. The cool thing about that is now we can connive for at least 8 next turn because again we've got 8 zombies now, and then boom, Ominous Seas can make another 8/8 and we can sack it again for 8 more zombies. Company Commander is going to make our creatures hard to block while also just putting 3 creatures onto the battlefield with him. Prince Imrahil is just a solid early drop that creates tokens here and there. Adeline is going to be amazing in this deck because she makes tapped and attacking creature tokens, and our commander cares about how many creatures are attacking, so she can get out of hand really quick and really start churning us through our deck. Myrael, Shield of Argive, another creature that's kind of balanced by her low defense. 4 is easy to block, but again we're buffing her up to the moon and then she will start making a massive army. We do run Clever Concealment in this deck because honestly the one thing it's kind of weak to is a board wipe. You got to start over. Raffine's 5 mana now, so Clever Concealment can make their board wipe, their answer, one-sided and put us super far ahead. Moving on to just some solid synergistic cards we run in the deck, we have the Ozolith. Now whenever anything dies with a counter on it, it just gets put on the Ozolith and then we can put it on something else. This can be extremely good in this deck. Ledger Shredder, just another way to connive some more. This guy's going to get massive, and again he's just going to start churning us through our deck a little more. Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves can just be solid protection for any of those creatures we want to protect. Guardian of Faith is another way we can protect our board state if someone tries to board wipe, and it is repeatable since it is a creature. Selfless Spirit is more board wipe protection. All we have to do is sacrifice it and boom, our creatures gain indestructible, and then it's super easy to cast him from our graveyard to get that effect again. Moving on to card advantage, we have Toothy. This is going to be solid because we are going to draw a lot of cards and then we can just buff them up with those connive triggers. Tefari's Ageless Insight takes our commander from card selection to just straight up card advantage. Now we're drawing 2 cards and discarding 1, so now we end up with just a ton of cards in our hand. Commissioner Savrina Rain, she's going to be amazing with the token strategy we run. If we go wide enough, we can just attack and kill everybody all at once, and then we do get the option to sacrifice creatures to draw some cards. Now I know this is a tutor, but it is also card advantage because usually a tutor just replaces itself, right? But what makes her different is she can do this every single combat step. So instead of saying, hey, tutor for a card, she basically says, hey, draw whatever card you want from your library once a turn if she deals combat damage. It's stupid busted. Dusk Legion Duelist is just a solid early game drop that can be a solid connive target to just draw some extra cards. Echo of Eons. Now this deck does have the potential to draw a lot of cards. Just in case we get out of hand or someone is running a mill strategy, I thought it'd be smart to just throw this in there. Moving on to the ramp, it's super boring but super efficient. We run all of the talismans we can, all of the signets we can, and then Soul Ring and Wayfarer's Bauble. Everything is ramping on turn 2 or less, that way we can consistently play our commander on turn 3, because that's literally all we want to do on turn 3. And then last but not least, let's move on to removal. Siren Storm Tamer, just a super solid body, so we can attack more to get bigger connive triggers, and if you sacrifice it, it can just fizzle a spell that targets you or a creature you control. Glenalindra Archmage is a little more busted in this deck because she has that persist trigger, so not only can she just counter any target non-creature spell, but when she comes back, if we connive with her, throw a counter on her, she can just be repeatable counter spells in your deck. Kinda busted. An Offer You Can't Refuse also makes an appearance in this deck, and then we have Anguished Unmaking and Generous Gift to get rid of any permanents we are having trouble with. Swords to Plowshare and Hagra Mauling can get rid of any creatures we're having problems with, and then we have Damn and Austere Command as our choice for board wipes. Austere Command's just super flexible, and so is Damn. Damn can either be single target removal, or it can just, destroy the whole board. I love this card. With that being said, guys, that brings me to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed enjoyed the deck tech, as this deck was built on a $250 budget, so you guys can include your non-budget option suggestions in the comments down below for anybody who just wants to ramp this deck up to the moon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors.